Chapter 5. Call sighed, pulled out her fake mole for the second time that day, and flipped open a panel beneath a small yellow readout. At the moment, all it displayed was 3 zeros. That would have to change if she and her compatriots wanted to get off Byzantium with their hides relatively intact. "Hey, Call!" growled Jonah. He and her other companions had posted themselves on either side of the 8-sided entrance to Immigration's control center, their backs against the wall, their weapons pointed at the ceiling. "What is it?" asked Call, removing a coil of access cord from the compartment and plugging the end of it into her forearm. Suddenly, a blue-white energy salvo came whipping through the open doorway, throwing Jonah's steamed features into sharp relief. Ripley and Jonah returned fire for a few moments, then pulled back out of sight again. "You just take your sweet frickin' time, Call," said Jonah. "And don't worry about us flesh and blood types." "Bite me," Call told him, and entered the data stream. Thankfully, she wouldn't have to plumb another abyss to open the doors to the holding bay. Just paddle around near the surface a little. All she needed was a simple 3-digit password, generated at random twice a day, and entrusted only to the guards on duty. Not that security was such a big deal there. Haulers went back and forth to their vessels every minute of the day. It just made the guards feel better knowing they could deny access. To normal people, maybe. Call aloud, rifling through protocols one after another. Not a second-generation android. Abruptly, she found it, the code that would open the door. 362, she said out loud. Then she punched it in. 362. And somewhere down the corridor, the door opened. Call could hear the creaking sound. "It's open," said Ripley, whose hearing was even better than the android's. "Move, I'll cover you." No one argued with her. They knew better. Besides, as good as Jonah or Crack or even Vriess was with a burner, none of them could hold a candle to Ripley in that department. Or any other, Call added silently. "See you on the Betty," Vriess told Call as he trundled by in his chair, following Crack to the holding bay. "Not if she sees you first," said Jonah. Saying goodbye with a couple of bursts through the doorway, he took off after Vriess and Crack. Then it was just Call and Ripley lingering in the control center. "Let me know when," said Ripley. Eagerly, Call slipped the needle out of her forearm. Leaving the damn thing dangling by its cord, she replaced her mole and glanced at her companion. "Now." And she began running in the direction of the docking bay, knowing Ripley was right behind her. Bolero stared at Corcoran's face on the vidscreen. "Run that by me again," she said, manipulating her controls out of his sight as she said it. "There's been an incident," said Corcoran, his face a lot grimmer than the last time Bolero saw him. "Some crazy haulers trying to steal station property. I'm sorry, but I've got to withdraw that clearance I gave you, at least until we straighten everything out." Bolero knew who those haulers were and what they were up to. And she knew she couldn't wait for her clearance to be reinstated. "I understand," she told Corcoran, hoping he wouldn't look too closely at the Betty's status. "Thanks," said the traffic officer. "Corcoran out." As his image blinked off the screen, it was replaced by the rear view from Vriess's chair, which showed Bolero that her comrades were on the move again. Ripley and Call were lagging behind, probably because Call needed a moment to unhook herself, which meant they would reach the Betty in a minute or two, at which point they would want to leave as soon as possible. Bolero wanted that too, more than anything in the galaxy, but Corcoran's clearance withdrawal complicated things a bit. With a tapped command, she switched the view on her vidscreen. It enabled her to look outward through the Betty's open cargo doors and see the ramp that bridged the gap between the docking bay entrance and the ship. It was one of 3 such ramps in this 90-degree quadrant of the station's larger bay structure, each one extending from immigration to a visiting vessel, like a spoke in a mammoth wheel. Bolero had expected to find the ramp empty, as the first of her comrades was a good 30 seconds away. But someone was halfway across it, headed for the Betty at full tilt. And it wasn't anyone she knew. "Hey!" she said out loud. As she watched, the stupid bastard darted through the open cargo doors. Then he veered out of sight, no doubt meaning to conceal himself somewhere. Once in a while, someone tried to stow away on a cargo hauler. Someone desperate. But if the guy knew what the Betty was about these days, he would never have considered it. Unfortunately, it was too late to tell him. And with the others on their way, it was also too late for Rama to eject the stowaway as he might an enterprising rodent. Rotten timing, Bolero thought. She would just have to let it go and sort it out later. Simone had never seen the hold of a cargo hauler, but it was pretty much the way he had always pictured it. A kraken's nest of black chains hung from the ceiling, creaking with the heavy-looking machine parts that descended from them. Each chain was joined by a quartet of moving shadows, doppelgangers coaxed into being by the harsh light of ceiling fixtures or the glow from ventilation grids in the floor. The bulkheads were a dead, pale grey, except where rust had blossomed and eaten through the thick, lumpy paint. A cloying, silicon-based scent, strong enough to sting the sinuses on contact, made Simone grimace. But mostly he was concentrating on finding a hiding place before anyone came after him. A stack of shackled containers in the corner of the room looked promising, if only for a moment. Then something else caught his eye, and he made that his objective instead. It was a handle belonging to a door set into the bulkhead. That suggested a storage compartment, maybe big enough to accommodate a person. If it wasn't already too full, it would probably be the way to go. Negotiating a path among the hanging chains, Simone got to the handle as quickly as he could. There wasn't anything tricky about opening it, just a clockwise twist of the wrist and yank. Behind the door was a dark, empty space. Definitely big enough for a guy my size. He was in luck. But there was also the matter of getting out again. Simone didn't want to suffocate to death, giving away his whereabouts only when his corpse started to stink. In the interest of survival, he would leave the compartment door ever so slightly ajar. Turning about and squatting in front of his hiding place, he inserted one foot behind him and then the other. Next, he slid himself backward until his feet hit the compartment's back wall. Finally, scrunching up just a little, he pulled the door mostly closed. There, he thought as he narrowed his view of the hold to the thinnest sliver. Nice and comfy. And if no one looked too closely, he could stay hidden for as long as he needed. Suddenly, he heard a series of footfalls, clanking one after another on a metal surface. But not the level Simone was on, somewhere above him. A catwalk, he decided. The newcomer remained silent for a moment, but Simone could feel his presence. Oh, he's looking for me, but he's not having any luck. All right, the guy said in a deep, sophisticated drawl, the kind that belonged to the patrician solemnity of a university lecture hall, not the hold of a banged-up old cargo hauler. You've had some fun, haven't you? But you need to know you've stowed away on the wrong vessel. I don't think so, Simone mused. I think it's exactly the vessel I want to be on. Our captain, the voice continued, isn't exactly what you'd call even-tempered. She won't look at your presence here with anything even approaching good humor. Simone smiled grimly. No problem, pal. I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. There's still time to make the wise decision, said the voice. And vanish before we take off. No harm, no foul. Forget our faces, and we'll be sure to forget yours. The guy didn't sound any closer to Simone than he was before. Obviously, he has no idea where I am. Looks like I've managed to stuff myself into the right cranny. Last chance, said the voice. Shove it, thought Simone. After what I've been through, you think I'm going to leave just because you tell me to? There was an audible sigh. Fine. Have it your way, Musa. Just don't say I didn't warn you. Simone heard footfalls again, but this time they were in full retreat, and soon they faded into nothingness. That was way too easy, he told himself. It was as if the guy didn't care if Simone was aboard when they took off, as if it really didn't matter to him. No doubt he figured Ripley would take care of it, but that was more than fine with Simone. Hell, Ripley was the one he wanted to see. Settling back into his nook, he closed his eyes and waited for the shiver in the deck plates that accompanied clamp removal. After that, the hauler would be moving under her own power, and there would be no returning him to the station. And he would come face to face with a legend. Mere seconds after Bolero saw the stowaway invade the Betty, the trio of Crack, Vriess, and Jonah came roaring onto the ramp. And seconds after that, Call and Ripley followed. Bolero waited until they were inside, then closed the cargo hatch. Using a toggle switch, she opened an intercom link and said, "Hold on, it's going to get a little rough." Even as she voiced the warning, she saw a squad of security guards swarm onto the ramp, cradling burners. As they got close enough, they started firing blue energy bursts at the Betty. Bolero didn't like the idea. My pilot seat, my ship, my damned paint job. But she knew the barrage would ultimately prove futile. The energy assault couldn't penetrate the vessel's triple-thick hull. At worst, it would short out a light fixture. "How are we gonna blow the clamps?" Jonah asked from down in the cargo bay. "Already blown," Bolero assured him. She heard the rash of skepticism that followed and was happy to ignore it. After all, it was true that ships typically sat in their clamps until the crews were aboard. And it was equally true that Corcoran had withdrawn their clearance to leave the station. No clearance, no clamp release. That was the way it worked. But as soon as Bolero had gotten an inkling of the trouble they were in, she had inched the Betty backward. So by the time Corcoran reactivated the magnetic fields around the clamps, the ship was already clear of them. Except she was hovering so close to the ramp and maintaining such an even keel, it was impossible for Corcoran or anyone else to figure it out. It was a trick most pilots wouldn't even have thought of, much less been able to pull off. Especially with crew about to board. One miscalculation, one slip, and her comrades could easily have gotten dumped into the depths of the bay. But if Bolero were just any pilot, she would never have gotten the chance to work with Ripley. Applying thrusters, she backed off even further from the clamps. Then, like a hawk that had sighted her prey, she dipped her starboard wing and swooped around the section of cylinder extending downward from immigration, headed for the bottom of the bay. 2/3 of the way, the image on Bolero's vidscreen changed. It was her pal, Corcoran, and he didn't look happy in the least. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Leaving," she said. "Sorry, lover." "There's no way out," said Corcoran. "The gates are locked. You can see that for yourself." Indeed, the massive retracting gates at the bottom of the docking bay were closed, blocking the Betty's exit. "Well, that would be a problem," said Bolero. "If I didn't have explosive devices that will wreck the gates and shut down your station for months." The traffic officer went white. "You wouldn't do that. It's a capital offense." "What the hell?" she said. "What's life for if not to take chances?" Accessing the intercom system while maintaining the link with Corcoran, she said, "You got those bombs ready?" "Say the word," came Jonah's response. Bolero started to respond, but before she could get an entire word out, she heard Corcoran protest. All right," he said. "You win. Just give me a moment to evacuate the bay and I'll open the gates." "Better move quickly," Bolero advised him. "My pal's got an itchy trigger finger." Then she cut the link. Naturally, it was all a bluff. They had no explosive devices. If Corcoran didn't blow the gates for them, Call would have to attempt to do so manually, though Bolero had no idea how she would obtain access to station operations. Fortunately, they had already demonstrated an affinity for violence. With luck, Corcoran would buy what Bolero was selling. "Come on," she thought, her eyes on the ponderous grey gates as she slowed the Betty's descent. "Open for me, baby." She had just decided that Corcoran was playing her for a fool when a strip of starry space materialized in front of her observation port. As she watched, cheering inwardly, the strip widened and then widened some more. Did it, she thought. And once they were out, they were out. Byzantium had no ships it could send after them, its security capabilities limited strictly to the station. Just then, Ripley entered the cockpit. Bolero smiled back at her. "Looks like clear sailing, Captain." "Good," said Ripley, taking the seat beside the pilots. "By the way," said Bolero, "we've got company." Ripley looked at her, uncharacteristically surprised. "A stowaway?" "Never saw him before. Short, skinny, red hair, goofy hat. Obviously didn't know what he was getting into." Ripley frowned. "Just get us out of here. We'll deal with him afterward." "Whatever you say," the pilot told her. By then, the bay gates had parted enough to let them through. Bolero applied thrusters, sat back, and watched the opening grow closer in her observation port. She was less than 50 meters from freedom when the gates started to close again. "What the hell?" she said out loud. Two possibilities occurred to her. One was that Corcoran had changed his mind out of spite. The other was that he had been overridden by a higher authority. Either way, it wouldn't get her anywhere to reopen negotiations. She had only one option: to shoot the gap. Pouring on maximum thrust, Bolero felt the Betty shiver as if she was coming apart. Still, the pilot could see she wasn't going to make it. Not at her present angle, anyway. The gates were closing too quickly, like the jaws of a great dark leviathan, and she was already too wide to fit through them. Her only chance was to rotate, and quickly. Punching in a command, she spun the Betty 180 degrees to starboard, presenting her ship's narrowest dimension to the diminishing aperture. Then she gritted her teeth and kept her eyes on the stars that were still visible. "Don't be mean to me," she thought as she plunged ahead. For a moment, Bolero was certain they were screwed. By far, the worst part was the feeling that she had let Ripley down. Then they were sailing through open space, a billion stars winking all around them. Somehow, the Leviathan's jaws had missed them, chomping down on nothingness. With a deep, earnest sigh of relief, Bolero established a heading and left Byzantium behind.